Welcome to a bonus video. Yes, decided to throw it in early. Lucky you. And it's going to be on my top 10 fitting tips. Are you ready for it? Let's do it. So there are 6 aspects that I think you need to test specifically and make sure that if you go for a fitting or you follow the process yourself or you form your questions before a fitting, you think about having tried and asked about or asked at the fitting about these 6 aspects. So without further ado, let's get to it. 1 is obviously the head. So you want to focus on whether you're talking about a driver or whether you're talking about different irons or different hybrids, for that matter putters or other woods. Which head from the various different brands and from the various different models might suit you best. So if possible, test several brands and then test several models within that. There may be ways to shortcut that process by looking at reviews, but in the end, it's really about what fits you. Second is the shaft. Extremely important, as important as the head, because each shaft has a different bend profile. Now you've got, in a way, 2 types of shafts. Fortunately, many manufacturers now are including many good shafts as part of their stock options. So you have options even within what they would do at no upcharge. And then you have upcharge shafts, which generally, unless you are a pro or you are a scratch golfer and you really are looking for total precision, you don't probably need to go for. But if you both have the funds and the inclination, then those would be additional options to check. So check the shaft. Third, make sure that you're tested for your lie, and you may have to go through that a couple of times. I found, certainly in my experience, that different fitters or different stores gave me slightly different readings, so it was good to sort of re-verify it at least a couple of times. The lie meaning the lie of the club on the ground. So I'm too flat, for example. Sorry, I didn't mean too flat, but actually that's what it is. There's a standard neutral, there's 1 flat, 2 flat, 1 upright, 2 upright. It really depends on how you're swinging the club. And there's a method for testing that, but make sure you cover the lie. Fourth, important to look at the weight balance. I discovered this recently that I had always had graphite shafts in my irons, and because I come down on the ball fast and sometimes too far, graphite shaft, and therefore the head was coming down too quickly and too fast, and I couldn't control it. So the issue of weight balance is very important. That partly relates to the bend profiles of shafts, particularly of graphite shafts, but think also about metal versus graphite. And I'm not by no means suggesting you should go the metal route. As I say, up to now, I've always had graphite in my irons. Finally, also important is actually to find the right ball. Balls have different spin rates, they have different launch conditions, they behave differently in different weather conditions, and of course the price range is significant. And you have different categories of balls. If you want a more detailed review of different balls and different categories and different findings on testing by a robot, then there's a very good recent review guide on my Golf Spy, which you could look up, and I will add to the link description below. It's better to have the wrong ball that you hit consistently in a particular way than keep changing balls even in the mid-round, because they have very different conditions, they have very different spin rates, they have different launch abilities for your speed of swing, weather affects them differently. There's different categories. There's 2-piece balls, 3-piece balls, 5-piece balls, urethane balls, urethane covers, cerulean covers, and so forth. So after trying a few different balls, you may want to just focus on the one you feel that is best for you. And again, you may want to make sure you test those under different conditions. Now, that's not the end. There's 4 more points that I'd like to make. And that's really about the approach that you take with fitting. It's worth thinking about getting fewer clubs rather than the full set. There's no need, in my view, to have 14 clubs unless you're a scratch handicapper. In fact, you'd be better off with 10 or 11 clubs, or even as low as 8 in some cases. Start getting used to a set. Use your imagination for different distances of particular clubs. You may want to sort of gap them every other one as one way to go. And you may want to also look at trying different techniques. Like something that helped me with my putting was to use my highest degree wedge, my 58-degree wedge, as a putter. Yeah, really. Opening the face, using the leading edge on the ball, and I found I was having a much more consistent, slower stroke. And then when you go back to the putter and you've memorized that movement, your putting is so much better. So worth trying. In fact, I was doing just as well with a hybrid as well as a wedge. So think about fewer clubs. It also makes it, another upside is you could have a pencil bag with 8 clubs and walk the course healthier for you, and much lighter as well. For senior golfers, that's a great advantage, and I highly recommend it. Next point, you may want to think about the mix. So, in the past, it was very common to have a full set of irons and then, a driver, 5-wood, 3-wood. Now, I think it's much better to think about fewer irons, maybe even not all the woods, but the woods that suit you most. In my case, for instance, I have a driver and a 5-wood. I don't possess a 3-wood. I don't find I need a 3-wood. And then I move to a hybrid, and then straight I move into my 6 irons up. So I've already got a set mix that is more suitable for what I'm trying to achieve. So think about the set mix as another aspect. Of course, particularly if you're going for the set mix, and particularly if you're going for a few clubs, you have to think about some aspect of gapping. So obviously you don't want to find yourself in a situation where between 160 yards and 130 yards you don't have a suitable club. So when I say fewer clubs and I say a set mix, I don't mean get yourself into difficulties for a distance that you're finding you're going to have to hit regularly. So you really should also think about your gapping, and don't rely just on the fitter for that. The more you're armed with all this stuff before you go to a fitter, the better and more useful the fitting will be. And that brings me to a very important point. Collect some swing data if you can. There are a number of now reasonably inexpensive tools, or in some cases certain ranges will allow you to record some of your data if they possess a TrackMan or GC Quad system. Those are big, expensive professional systems, but there are smaller versions which I will cover in some other clips that I use, and enabled me to collect my data on the range. So I knew exactly how far I was hitting my 7-iron, and to some extent how well, how I was doing with my 8-iron or 9-iron, and what if the gap was not huge, I could of course skip the one in between. So this is a way to also think about your set mix as well. But it also means that when you go to a fitter and you're thinking about different clubs to be fit on, you already are ready to say, well, I feel I need one hybrid but not 2, because my 5-wood will and the 21-degree hybrid, whatever it happens to be, complement each other nicely to fill the gap that I need, and then I can jump to my 7-iron next, and I don't really need anything in between. So don't be shy with sharing your data, posing all these questions. Go armed ready with all these questions, and your swing data will help you feel both confident about it, but also something to provide the fitter should it be necessary. So those are the really top 10 points. Now, what does this really amount to when it comes to an approach for fitting? My recommendation is you need to take a multiple approach. So you'll need to you can look at some reviews to start off making some shortlists for yourself, be it on the head or the shaft, etc. You may want to definitely try out some clubs, different heads of course, but different shafts if they carry them on some of the ranges. Go to 2 or 3 different ranges because often they carry different clubs and different ranges of shafts. You may want to go to golf stores and try some out, and don't be pressured into buying. But actually, as a way of eliminating some of these points and collecting your own data. I found, for example, recently that when I went through the process and tried a particular model and brand of iron, and I tried it 3 or 4 times in the different locations, and I tried it with 2 or 3 different shafts against 3 or 4 others that I tried regularly, not necessarily in the same places. That's helped me narrow down actually what seemed to fit me best. And that allowed me to then hone in much more precisely, not only on fitting, but on ordering something that would suit my swing. So I would suggest that you build that armory and try many balls, because sometimes even if you just go for an hour's fitting, you may not be on that day. You may be coming over the top suddenly when you don't normally do that, and then you're fit accordingly, and then you find it didn't quite fit you. And to be very honest, that happened to me a couple of times. I don't totally blame the fitter, but equally I blame myself for not having been as prepared as I should have been, and as thorough as I should have been. After all, it is a significant investment that you probably want to keep for 3 or 4 seasons before the technology jumps again and you feel that you could benefit from a change, or your swing changes. And brings me to the last and final point. Clubs won't fix a bad swing. They may help limit some excesses, but you'll still have that bad swing. So invest equally, if not more, in your own swing, in drills that go with that. And I will certainly be covering some of those aspects in the top 10 series. Folks, I hope this quick introduction to my 10 fitting tips that are up here are useful. Please feel free to comment, subscribe, it's free. Give a thumbs up if you like this. If it's helpful, more's following. This was something I decided to just do on the spur of the moment as a way of synthesizing the 4 clips I did on fitting. Well, let's have happy golfing. Let's do it.